watch MTV. You thought I was a clean-cut Negro, but I'm just like the rest of the country pickers. Just watch my fingers move like diamonds. Watch.
No shots, huh?
No shit.
When I first heard it, I said, that's that Trapman sound there.
That shit is a trip, man.
Hey, what can I say? Do you want carpet? I'm the man that can sell your remnants. Doesn't matter. Call me, no money down.
Waiting on my...
There are only 3 beings that know what happened that day. And that's Roger, and that's Larry, and that's God.
During the 1980s, this band was one of the most underappreciated funk groups around. Zapp revolutionized the computer pop of electro with their trademark vocal-to-talk boxes and bumping grooves, emulating the earthier side of Prince and Cameo. This band unleashes funky, high-energy music with a contagious groove built for dancing, loving, and good times. Made up of masterful musicians who have been getting together since the late 1970s, the group's sizzling chemistry can be attributed to the fact that it has always been a joyful family affair. The centerpiece of today's video is all about Zapp. Now before we start, let's be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and push that notification bell to be sure you won't miss out on any more content. Now, without further ado, let's cue that intro. Roger Troutman was born in Hamilton, Ohio on November 29, 1951. He started making music in the middle to late 1960s. In 1966, he released his first solo recording attempts, Jolly Roger and Nighttime, under the band name Lil Roger and his Fabulous Fells. Team Records was a relatively unknown Ohio company that has since gone out of business. Although neither song received recognition due to its very limited release, Troutman and brothers pursued their music career throughout the 1970s, forming Roger and the Human Body in 1976 on their privately owned label Troutman Bros. Their own label allowed Troutman and the band to give a slightly wider and more high-profile release of their own music, issuing their first and only album, introducing Roger in 1976. During the latter part of the 1970s, Roger Troutman continued to record with his brothers. In 1977, he also adopted the Zapp nickname from his brother Terry, which he had previously used under the band Roger and the Human Body. The group, searching for recognition, began playing at various small venues locally around Ohio. The Troutman family had long-standing friendships with Ohio natives Phelps Catfish Collins and William Earl Bootsy Collins, who had both been involved with Parliament Funkadelic in the early 1970s. Phelps and Bootsy were present at a performance, and they were blown away by Zapp's musical ability. As a result, Bootsy extended an invitation to Roger to visit the United Sound Studios in Detroit, which was the headquarters of operations for the P-Funk studio and was frequently utilized by Parliament Funkadelic. Roger Troutman subsequently wrote and recorded the demo for it. More bounced to the ounce in 1978. George Clinton, the leader of Funkadelic, liked the recording and encouraged Troutman to present the demo to Warner Bros. Warner Bros. Records signed Zapp in early 1979, and on July 28, 1980, the band released their debut album, which was recorded by Roger and produced by Bootsy. This was the band's first recording on a major label. The music of the album, which is heavily influenced by Parliament Funkadelic, stands in stark contrast to Zapp's subsequent recordings in a significant portion. More Bounce to the Ounce reached number 2 on a Billboard Hot R&B tracks for 2 weeks during the autumn of 1980. By November 18, 1980, Zapp had been certified gold by the RIAA. After the 1980 release of Zapp's debut album, tensions rose between Roger Troutman and George Clinton. Troutman's solo album, The Many Faces of Roger, was mostly funded by Clinton through CBS and was set to be released on his own Uncle Jam Records label. By the early 1980s, Clinton and his musical endeavors were in financial danger due to his poor management abilities and evolving musical tastes. Around the time Troutman's debut was set to be released, Warner Bros. Records pulled Clinton from the label. The electric spanking of War Babies was Funkadelic's final album with Warner Bros., on which Troutman had worked briefly. Under demand from the label, it was reduced from a double album to a single CD. Troutman recognized the chaos around Clinton and their collaboration by accepting a greater offer from Warner Bros. For the demo recordings of his album. With Clinton out of the picture, Troutman was left to exercise virtually full creative control over the band's subsequent work. In Clinton's biography, George Clinton, for the record, Troutman was quoted as offhandedly commenting, "Let Guy Willikers, Warner Bros. Offer me more money." Clinton's view, expressed in his response, was that CBS paid for it. I paid for it. I don't like to go into it on the negative side, but it costs about $5 million and a lot of people's jobs and what we consider as the empire falling. The financial loss from the rupture with Troutman is credited as one of the factors that derailed Clinton's musical career and sent Funkadelic into hiatus. Zapp released the second album, Zapp 2, on October 14, 1982. Electronic production techniques featured prominently, including liberal use of the talk box that became Troutman's signature. Despite the contrasting styles between the first and the second albums, Zapp 2 attained gold status by September 21st, 1982. The album fared almost as well as Zapp's debut, peaking at number 2 on the Billboard R&B chart and reaching 25 on the Billboard 200 albums chart. The single Dance Floor Part 1 peaked at number 1 on the R&B singles chart of 1982. Zapp released 3 additional albums in quick succession, maintaining the slick electronic style that Zapp 2 had established, but with dwindling success. Zapp 3 was released in 1983 and earned a gold certification. However, it only reached 39 on the Billboard 200 and number 9 on the R&B albums chart. Zapp 3's weaker commercial performance signaled that the band's popularity in effect were beginning to wane by the mid-1980s as post-disco music fell out of favor by the release of The New Zapp for You. In October 1985, the decreasing trend was clear. The album was not certified gold until 1994, over a decade after its initial release. Zapp's influence waned further in the second half of the 1980s as Troutman concentrated on his solo career. Zapp's final release before Troutman's death was Zapp 5 in September 1989, which had only moderate financial success and did not get an RIAA certification. The increasingly dominating West Coast hip-hop movement of the early to mid-1990s briefly reintroduced Zapp and Roger as their material was used as samples for hip-hop recordings. Troutman rose to prominence after supplying talkbox background vocals for both the original and remixed versions of Tupac Shakur's 95-96 comeback single, California Love. An alternate version of the music video shows Troutman playing the keyboard and talkbox during a party Roger's involvement in. California Love awarded him a Grammy nomination for Best Rap Performance by a Duo or Group in 1997. On Sunday morning, April 25, 1999, Roger Troutman was fatally shot several times in the torso by his older brother, Larry, as he exited a recording studio in Dayton. He was taken to Good Samaritan Hospital but passed shortly after of his wounds. Larry's body was found unalived in a car a short distance away from the crime scene.
After filing for bankruptcy in 1992, court files showed debts of nearly $4 million.
They were building from ground up, and they were building some, really expensive homes. So before you made the money, you had to spend the money. They weren't collecting as much rent.
But back in Ohio, Larry was struggling to save the family businesses, and the pressures were taking a toll.
I did notice a little change in my dad. I just really saw him worried. I've never seen him like that. And, but due to the person that he was, you just felt that, oh, well, he'll brush it off his shoulder and keep on moving.
said, what if I have $2 million? And I said, then you're rich. And he said, what if I owe $4 million?
For 2 decades, Roger and Larry were a team, one and inseparable. But now Roger wanted a change.
Roger was wanting to do some things a little more independently, as an artist, but he wasn't going to break up with his brother or break up with the company or the organization. There were just some things as an artist that he wanted to do.
Whatever tensions existed between Roger and Larry Troutman came to a head on the morning of April 25th, 1999.
I'll never forget that day. It's like, what were you doing when 9/11 hit? You know exactly where you were. I was at home in a bed, and I got a phone call to come to the hospital that your brother's hurt.
The phone rang. I pushed the answer, and it was Shirley Murdoch on the other end. She said, Roger has been shot. I said, what?
Accident, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. It was an accident.
My brother Rufus, he finally called me, and then he asked me, was I sitting down? I said, well, yeah, I can be. And so he told me what happened. He said, well, Roger and Larry are dead, just like that.
Police found Roger Troutman in an alley behind his recording studio, bleeding. A few blocks away, Larry Troutman's car had slammed into a tree after he with a bullet from the same gun.
My best friend, my hero, my best friend, my hero, my 2 brothers. Oh my God, I was done, man. I was done. I was done. I was done.
There were no witnesses at the time, and Larry's motive for orchestrating the apparent incident of Roger and himself remains unclear. Larry had been experiencing increasingly severe financial problems managing the family-run housing company Troutman Enterprises, which he eventually filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy owing $400,000 in tax. Larry might also have been bitter after Roger fired him as manager of his music career, a position Larry had held for several years. Roger was survived by his 6 sons and 5 daughters. His eldest son, Roger Lynch Troutman Jr., passed of head injuries just a few years after the murder of his father. After Troutman's passing, Ice Cube said that more Bounce to the Ounce introduced him to hip-hop. I was in the 6th grade. We stayed after school. We had this dude named Mr. Locke, and he used to bring in his radio with these pop lockers. He used to teach the dance group, the LA Lockers, and he would do community service and after-school programs. He knew a lot of kids and introduced them to all the new dances. He put on that song More Bounce, and they started pop locking. And I think from that visual, from seeing that, it was my first introduction into hip hop, period. I didn't know nothing about nothing. I hadn't heard of Rapper's Delight yet. It was the first thing that was really fly to me. They started dancing, and since More Bounce goes on forever, they just got down. I just think that was a rush of adrenaline for me, like a chemical reaction in my brain. The resultant impact of Roger and Larry's passing left the band stranded, halting production. Without Roger serving as the creative source, they effectively disbanded and quietly left the music industry altogether. Warner Bros. Records eventually dropped the band from their label, bringing the professional recording career of Zapp to a close. A few years later, Zapp resurfaced for a short period after the establishment of its own independent label, Zapptown Records, by the Troutman family. The label released its only album, Zapp 6 Back by Popular Demand, in 2003. Zapp returned to performing only in live concerts, touring across the United States. Now, before we go, I have a few questions for you all. Do you believe Zapp belongs in a Hall of Fame? Also, what is your favorite song from Roger Troutman and Zapp?